They laughed when the Omega fell, but they never noticed the 50 shadows watching silently from the forest. The cold wind moved through Frostmoon Kingdom, as Claire Morgan stood alone beneath the towering stone walls of the ancient Pack territory. She had learned a long time ago that silence could hurt more than words. Every glance, every whisper, and every judgment reminded her that many in the kingdom saw only her title. To them, she was only an Omega, someone they believed could never stand beside the strongest members of the Pack. But Claire knew something they did not. A person's worth was never decided by the opinion of others. For years, she had walked through the kingdom carrying a quiet strength that no one recognized. She helped villagers when they needed support. She cared for injured animals near the forest edge. She offered kindness even to those who rarely showed it to her. Claire never expected praise. She never searched for attention. She simply believed that doing what was right mattered, even when nobody was watching. Deep within the forest surrounding Frostmoon Kingdom, something was always watching. Hidden between the ancient trees, pairs of glowing eyes followed Claire's path. They did not see an ordinary Omega. They saw the person who had once shown them compassion when the rest of the world turned away. But Claire did not know they were there. She continued living her quiet life, unaware that a secret loyalty surrounded her. Inside the kingdom, however, things were different. Many members of the Pack believed that an Omega should know her place. They judged Claire before understanding her. They mistook her kindness for weakness and her patience for surrender. Claire heard their words, but she refused to let them decide who she was. One evening during a gathering near the castle courtyard, Claire entered the place where Pack members discussed important matters. The atmosphere changed as soon as she arrived. Conversations became quieter. Eyes turned toward her. Some looked curious. Others looked doubtful. Claire lowered her head slightly, not because she felt inferior, but because she understood the weight of the moment. At the center of the gathering stood Alexander Reed, the Alpha King of Frostmoon Kingdom. He was known throughout the territory as a powerful and disciplined leader. His presence alone commanded attention. For years, he had carried the responsibility of protecting his people and maintaining the traditions of the kingdom. When he looked at Claire, he saw an Omega who seemed different from the rumors. She did not demand recognition. She did not seek sympathy. She simply stood with quiet confidence. Alexander noticed something that others had ignored. There was strength in the way she remained calm. There was courage in the way she continued forward despite being misunderstood. But before he could learn more, the voices of the Pack returned, filling the courtyard with old beliefs and familiar judgments. Claire remained silent, but deep inside, she knew this moment would change something. She did not know that the night would soon reveal a secret hidden for years. She did not know that the forest was waiting. And she did not know that the people who believed she had no one would soon discover the truth. Claire Morgan was never alone. The shadows had been watching. The wolves had been waiting. And soon, Frostmoon Kingdom would learn the real meaning of strength. The morning after the gathering at Frostmoon Kingdom, Claire Morgan returned to her quiet routine, unaware that the attention surrounding her had already begun to change. The whispers inside the castle continued, but they no longer felt the same. Something had shifted. For the first time, some members of the Pack had started wondering if they had misunderstood the Omega they thought they knew. Claire did not notice those small changes. She was too focused on the things that had always mattered to her. Near the edge of the kingdom, where the forest met the village paths, Claire spent her days caring for others. She collected herbs, helped families prepare remedies, and offered kindness to anyone who needed it. She never asked whether someone was an Alpha, Beta, or Omega before offering her help. To Claire, every person deserved compassion. Years earlier, during a difficult winter, Claire had discovered a group of abandoned wolves deep within the forest. While others believed they were dangerous and should be avoided, Claire saw something different. She saw creatures that were frightened and in need of care. She spent days bringing food and water to the forest edge until they were strong enough to survive on their own. She never told anyone about that time. She did not want admiration. She simply believed that kindness should not require a reward. But the wolves never forgot. Deep among the trees, they remembered the Omega who had shown them mercy when nobody else would. Meanwhile, inside the castle, Alexander Reed continued thinking about Claire. The Alpha King had met countless people throughout his years of leadership, But something about her remained in his thoughts. Most people who entered his presence wanted something. They wanted influence, recognition, or a place closer to power. Claire wanted none of those things. She only wanted to live peacefully and be treated fairly. That difference caught his attention. One afternoon, Alexander walked through the village near the castle, observing how his people lived. He saw Claire helping an elderly villager carry supplies and noticed how naturally others trusted her. She did not command respect. She earned it. For the first time, Alexander questioned the traditions he had always followed. He wondered how many people had been overlooked simply because others refused to see beyond their titles. As the sun began to set, Claire walked toward the forest path carrying a small basket of herbs. She paused when she felt the quiet around her change. The forest seemed different. The air felt still, almost as if something was waiting. She looked between the trees but saw nothing unusual. She smiled softly and continued walking. She did not know that hidden beyond the shadows, dozens of wolves watched over her journey. They were not following because they were commanded to. They were there because they remembered. They remembered the Omega who chose kindness when the world chose judgment. And while Claire continued believing she was simply living an ordinary life, the truth was slowly approaching. The kingdom had not discovered her secret yet. But soon, everyone would understand that the quiet Omega they ignored had a bond with the forest that could change everything. The days following the gathering at Frostmoon Kingdom brought a quiet change that few people noticed at first. The castle remained the same, the traditions remained the same, and the voices of doubt still existed. But something inside the kingdom had started moving in a different direction. Alexander Reed could feel it. The Alpha King had spent years believing that order came from following the rules passed down by previous generations. But after seeing Claire Morgan, he began questioning whether those rules had always been fair. Claire never asked him to change the kingdom. She never demanded recognition. She simply continued living with the same kindness and patience she had always shown. That was what made her impossible to ignore. One morning, Alexander visited the village again, hoping to understand the people beyond the castle walls. He found Claire near the edge of the forest, organizing herbs and speaking with villagers who trusted her completely. She noticed him approaching and politely greeted him. "I did not expect to see the Alpha King here today," Claire said with a gentle smile. Alexander looked around at the peaceful scene. "I wanted to see what my people see every day," he answered. Claire studied his expression, realizing that he was not there as a ruler giving orders. He was there as someone searching for answers. Their conversation was simple, but it stayed in Alexander's mind long after he returned to the castle. Claire spoke about helping others without expecting anything in return. She spoke about how every creature deserved a chance to be understood. She never mentioned the unfair treatment she had received. She never complained about the people who judged her. Instead, she focused on the kind of world she hoped to create. That surprised Alexander more than anything. Many people who experienced rejection carried anger. Claire carried compassion. Meanwhile, rumors began spreading among the pack. Some members wondered why the Alpha King seemed interested in an Omega who had always been overlooked. Others believed Claire was hiding something. They could not understand how someone with so little status could have such a strong presence. But deep within the forest, the truth remained hidden. The wolves continued watching from the shadows. They sensed the changes happening around Claire. They sensed that the time they had been waiting for was approaching. One evening, as Claire walked home through the forest path, she stopped beside an old tree. She placed her hand against its ancient bark and quietly remembered the past. She remembered the cold nights when she had helped the wolves. She remembered how alone she had felt when others refused to understand her. But she also remembered the reason she continued showing kindness. She believed that the world could become better if someone chose to start. From behind the trees, the wolves watched silently. They had followed her journey for years. They knew the heart she carried. They knew the truth that the kingdom had failed to see. At the castle, Alexander stood beside the window overlooking the forest, unaware that a secret was waiting just beyond the trees. He had spent years protecting his kingdom from outside dangers. Now, he was beginning to realize that sometimes the greatest changes came from the people everyone else ignored. And soon, the hidden bond between Claire and the forest would no longer remain a secret. The quiet balance of Frostmoon Kingdom began to shift as the connection between Claire Morgan and the hidden forest became harder to ignore. For years, the people of the kingdom had walked past the forest without wondering what secrets it carried. They saw only trees, shadows, and old stories that most believed were nothing more than legends. But Claire knew the forest differently. She knew the silence, the paths, and the creatures who lived beyond the edge of the kingdom. What she did not know was that the truth she had kept private for so long was about to be revealed. One evening, a group of pack members gathered near the village and began questioning why the Alpha King had shown interest in an Omega. They believed Claire had somehow gained attention she did not deserve. Their words traveled through the kingdom, but Claire refused to respond with anger. She had learned that trying to convince people who had already decided not to listen only created more distance. Instead, she continued helping the villagers, showing through her actions what words never could. Alexander Reed noticed this more than anyone. The Alpha King watched how Claire carried herself when others doubted her. He saw that she never changed her kindness depending on who was watching. That consistency made him question everything he had been taught about strength. One night, Alexander walked beyond the castle walls toward the forest path where Claire often gathered herbs. The moonlight covered the trees in silver, and the quiet air felt different from any other night. As he walked deeper, he noticed movement between the trees. He stopped, not because he felt threatened, but because he sensed something ancient and meaningful surrounding the forest. Hidden among the shadows were the wolves that had followed Claire for years. They did not approach him. They simply watched. Alexander realized these creatures were not ordinary wolves wandering through the wilderness. There was intelligence in their eyes. There was purpose in their presence. At that moment he remembered something Claire had once said. Sometimes the ones everyone ignores are the ones who understand the world the most. For the first time, Alexander wondered if Claire had been connected to something much greater than anyone realized. The next morning, strange news began spreading throughout Frostmoon Kingdom. People reported seeing large numbers of wolves near the forest, quietly moving as if they were protecting something important. The pack members who once dismissed Claire started asking questions. Why were these wolves always near her? Why did they appear whenever she was in the forest? Why did they seem to trust her completely? Claire heard the rumors but remained calm. She knew the truth could not stay hidden forever. She had never wanted the wolves to become a symbol of her importance. She only wanted them to be safe. But the kingdom was beginning to understand something that Claire had known all along. True bonds were not created through titles or power. They were created through compassion. As the days passed, Alexander continued searching for answers. The Alpha King, who once believed he understood every corner of his kingdom, was now discovering a mystery that challenged everything he knew. And deep within the forest, the wolves waited patiently. They had protected Claire in silence for years. Soon the entire kingdom would learn why. The secret that had remained hidden beneath the forests of Frostmoon Kingdom for years was finally beginning to surface. The appearance of the wolves had changed the way people looked at Claire Morgan, but Claire herself remained unchanged. She still woke before sunrise, still walked the familiar paths near the village, and still offered her help without expecting anything in return. She never wanted the attention that was suddenly surrounding her. She only wanted people to understand that kindness did not need a reason. Inside the castle, Alexander Reed continued searching for answers. The Alpha King had spent his life studying the history of his kingdom, yet he had never encountered anything that explained the unusual bond between Claire and the wolves. He entered the ancient archives beneath the castle, a place filled with forgotten records and stories from generations before him. As he searched through old documents, he discovered references to a rare connection between certain members of the pack and the creatures of the forest. The records spoke of individuals who earned loyalty not through power or rank, but through compassion and trust. Alexander paused as he read those words. They reminded him of Claire. For the first time, he began to understand that the wolves were not following Claire because she controlled them. They were following her because they remembered her heart. Meanwhile, Claire walked deeper into the forest to visit the wolves she had cared for years earlier. The moment she arrived, the quiet woods seemed to come alive. The wolves appeared from between the trees, not with fear or hesitation, but with familiarity. Claire smiled softly as she looked at them. She never saw them as symbols of power. She saw them as friends who had survived difficult times together. One of the oldest wolves stepped closer, reminding Claire of the first night they met. She remembered how small and uncertain they had seemed back then. She remembered choosing to help when others would have walked away. Claire never imagined that simple act of kindness would create a bond that lasted for years. When Alexander eventually found Claire in the forest, he stopped at a distance and watched quietly. He saw something he had never witnessed before. The Omega everyone underestimated stood surrounded by loyalty that could not be bought or demanded. She had earned it through compassion. Claire noticed him and gently asked, "How long have you been standing there?" Alexander smiled slightly. "Long enough to realize I misunderstood you." Claire looked at him, unsure of what he meant. The Alpha King stepped closer and spoke honestly. "I spent years believing strength came from authority. But you showed me that some people inspire loyalty without ever asking for it." Those words meant more to Claire than he realized. She had spent so much of her life being judged by what others thought she lacked. Hearing someone finally recognize what she carried inside felt different. But their conversation was interrupted when news arrived from the kingdom. More members of the pack had begun questioning the old beliefs that caused them to overlook Claire. The wolves had revealed a truth that could no longer be ignored. The Omega they dismissed was someone the forest itself respected. And soon, Frostmoon Kingdom would have to decide whether it would continue holding on to the past or finally accept the person who had been showing them the future all along. The discovery inside the ancient archives changed something deep within Alexander Reed. For the first time in years, the Alpha King questioned not only the traditions of Frostmoon Kingdom, but also the way he had measured people's worth. He had spent his entire life believing that strength was something visible, a powerful voice, a respected title, a position above others. But Claire Morgan had shown him something different. She had no crown, no command over others, and no desire to prove herself. Yet the loyalty surrounding her was stronger than anything Alexander had witnessed before. As the days passed, the kingdom began to feel the impact of this revelation. The wolves near the forest were no longer viewed as a mystery to fear. Instead, they became a reminder of a truth the pack had forgotten. Respect was not created by demanding it. It was created through the way someone treated others when nobody was watching. Claire noticed the changes happening around her, but she remained careful. She had spent years being overlooked, and she knew how quickly people's opinions could change. She did not want temporary admiration. She wanted genuine understanding. One morning, Alexander invited Claire to walk through the oldest gardens of the castle. The paths were surrounded by ancient trees and flowers that had grown there for generations. It was a quiet place where many previous alpha leaders had reflected on their decisions. As they walked, Alexander spoke honestly about his past. "I thought being a leader meant always appearing strong," he said. "But I realize now that refusing to listen can make someone weaker." Claire looked at him with surprise. The Alpha King had always seemed impossible to change, yet here he was admitting that he had been wrong. "Change is not easy," Claire replied. "But it is possible when someone truly wants to understand." Alexander respected those words because they reflected everything about her. Claire had every reason to become bitter, but she chose kindness. She had every reason to close herself away, but she continued helping others. Meanwhile, some members of the pack struggled with the truth. They had spent years believing that an Omega could never hold an important place in the kingdom. Accepting Claire meant accepting that their old beliefs had been incomplete. During a meeting inside the castle, several members questioned whether the wolves' loyalty should matter. They wondered why creatures of the forest would choose Claire above others. Alexander listened carefully before answering. "The wolves did not choose her because of her title," he said. "They chose her because of her character." The room became silent. Those words carried a meaning that many had never considered. Claire had not gained respect because she suddenly became powerful. She had gained respect because people were finally seeing the strength that had always existed within her. That evening, Claire stood near the forest and watched the wolves resting beneath the trees. She felt grateful but also uncertain about what the future would bring. She never wanted to become a symbol. She only wanted to remain the person she had always been. But far beyond the forest, Frostmoon Kingdom was preparing for a new chapter. The truth about Claire could no longer remain hidden. And as the kingdom began to change, everyone would soon discover that the Omega they underestimated had been carrying a strength they never understood. The truth about Claire Morgan could no longer remain hidden inside Frostmoon Kingdom. For years, people had created their own image of the Omega without ever taking the time to understand her. They saw her position before they saw her heart. They noticed what they believed she lacked instead of recognizing everything she had already given. But now the entire kingdom was beginning to question those old beliefs. Alexander Reed stood at the center of that change. The Alpha King who once represented the traditions of the past was now the person asking others to see beyond them. He knew changing a kingdom was not about making a single announcement. It was about changing the way people looked at one another. During a gathering in the castle hall, members of the pack came together to discuss the strange connection between Claire and the wolves of the forest. Many had questions, but for the first time those questions came from curiosity instead of judgment. Claire stood quietly beside Alexander, listening as others shared their thoughts. She did not interrupt. She did not demand that anyone apologize. She simply allowed people the chance to understand. Alexander noticed that about her. Even in the moment when everyone was finally recognizing her value, Claire remained humble. The wolves did not follow Claire because she asked them to, Alexander said to the gathered pack. They followed her because she showed them compassion when nobody else would. His words changed the atmosphere in the room. The pack members began remembering the moments they had ignored. They remembered how Claire helped others without asking for anything. They remembered how she continued showing kindness even when she received none in return. Slowly, the image they had created of her began to disappear. In its place, they saw the person who had always been there. Later that evening, Claire walked through the village and noticed something different. People greeted her with warmth instead of hesitation. They asked for her advice, thanked her for her help, and treated her presence with respect. It was the kind of acceptance she had once believed might never happen. Yet Claire did not feel like she had won a victory over anyone. She felt something much simpler. She felt understood. Alexander joined her near the edge of the village as the evening sky turned golden. You realize you changed this kingdom without ever trying to control it, he said. Claire smiled softly. I only did what I believed was right. Alexander looked toward the forest where the wolves watched quietly from the distance. That is exactly why it mattered. For the first time, Claire understood that her kindness had reached farther than she imagined. It had not only touched the wolves. It had not only changed Alexander. It had reached an entire kingdom. But as Frostmoon Kingdom began accepting a new way of thinking, another question remained. Why had the wolves chosen Claire specifically? Why had their bond with her lasted for so many years? The answer was hidden deeper within the history of the forest, waiting for the right moment to be revealed. And soon, Claire would discover that her connection to the wolves was not only about the kindness she had shown in the past. It was connected to a much older secret that could shape the future of the entire kingdom. The hidden truth beneath the ancient forest of Frostmoon Kingdom was finally beginning to reveal itself. For generations, stories had been passed down about the deep connection between certain souls and the creatures that lived beyond the kingdom walls. Most people considered those stories forgotten legends, but Claire Morgan was discovering that some legends were not forgotten because they were unimportant. They were forgotten because people had stopped looking for the truth. After the gathering in the castle hall, Alexander Reed began studying the oldest records of the kingdom. He searched through documents that had remained untouched for decades, hoping to understand why the wolves had chosen Claire. The more he learned, the more he realized that the answer was not about power or status. It was about character. One ancient record described a rare bond formed between humans and forest guardians. It explained that the bond could not be created through commands or authority. It could only appear when someone showed genuine compassion during a time when others chose to look away. Alexander read those words several times because they reminded him of Claire. She had never tried to gain influence. She had never tried to make others follow her. She simply helped because she believed it was the right thing to do. Meanwhile, Claire visited the forest once again. The wolves gathered around her in peaceful silence, and for the first time, she began wondering if there was more to their connection than she understood. She had always believed they remembered the kindness she showed them years ago, but now she wondered if their bond carried a deeper meaning. As she sat beneath the ancient trees, she remembered the night she first found them. She remembered how the world had ignored them and how easy it would have been to walk away. But Claire had chosen compassion. She had chosen to care when nobody else did. That choice had shaped everything that came after. When Alexander arrived at the forest, he found Claire surrounded by the wolves. He stopped for a moment, taking in the scene before him. The Alpha King who once believed he understood every form of strength now witnessed something that could not be measured by rank or authority. "Do you know why they trust you?" Alexander asked quietly. Claire looked toward the wolves before answering. "I think they remember that someone cared." Alexander smiled. "Slightly. That may be true. But I think they also recognize something in you that you do not see in yourself." Claire looked at him with curiosity. "What do you mean?" "You have spent your whole life proving you are not weak," Alexander said. "But the truth is, you never needed to prove anything. Your strength was always there." Those words stayed with Claire. She had spent years trying to survive a world that judged her. She had forgotten that surviving was not the only thing she had accomplished. She had created connections. She had inspired loyalty. She had changed people without ever trying to control them. Back in the kingdom, more members of the pack began accepting the truth. The Omega they once underestimated had become someone they respected. But one final mystery remained. The ancient records hinted that Claire's connection to the forest was not only a memory from the past. It was part of a future that would bring change to Frostmoon Kingdom. And as the moon rose above the ancient trees, Claire and Alexander realized that the bond between an Omega, an Alpha King, and the wolves of the forest was only beginning to reveal its true purpose. The first light of morning touched Frostmoon Kingdom, revealing a place that no longer felt the same. The ancient walls remained standing, the forests remained quiet, and the traditions that had guided generations still existed. But something within the kingdom had changed forever. The people had learned that strength could not be measured only by titles, appearances, or positions. They had learned it through the story of Claire Morgan. For years, Claire had been the Omega many refused to understand. They saw her differences before they saw her heart. They judged her challenges before they recognized her courage. But now the kingdom finally understood what had been there all along. Claire was never someone who needed to become strong. She had always carried strength within her. Alexander Reed stood beside her as the kingdom gathered to begin a new chapter. The Alpha King who once believed leadership meant carrying every burden alone now understood that true leadership meant seeing the value in others. He looked across the crowd and remembered how different everything had been when he first met Claire. He remembered the assumptions he carried. He remembered how easily people could overlook someone simply because of a title. But Claire had changed more than his opinion. She had changed the way he saw the entire kingdom. During the gathering, Alexander spoke honestly to the people of Frostmoon Kingdom. He did not speak as a ruler standing above them. He spoke as someone who had learned from his own mistakes. "A kingdom becomes stronger when it listens to every voice within it," he said. "Not when it decides whose voice matters before hearing it." The words reached everyone, especially those who had once ignored Claire. They realized that the Omega they underestimated had never asked for power. She had never wanted to stand above anyone. She only wanted to live with kindness and dignity. After the gathering, Claire walked toward the forest one final time, accompanied by Alexander. The wolves waited beneath the ancient trees, just as they had for years. But this time everything felt different. They were no longer hidden guardians watching from the shadows. They were recognized as part of the story that had changed the kingdom. Claire looked at them with gratitude. She knew their bond had never been about control or ownership. It had always been about trust. Alexander watched her quietly and smiled. He finally understood why the wolves had chosen her. They had not chosen the strongest person in the kingdom. They had chosen the kindest one. Years later, the story of Frostmoon Kingdom was remembered not as the tale of an Omega who was saved by others, but as the tale of an Omega who reminded everyone what true strength meant. It was the story of a King Alpha who learned that power without compassion was incomplete. It was the story of a kingdom that discovered respect could heal old divisions. And it was the story of Claire Morgan, the woman who proved that even someone the world overlooked could become the person who changed everything. Because sometimes the quietest hearts carry the greatest strength, and sometimes the person everyone ignores is the one who leads the way toward a better future.